What happens when poise meets provocation in a living room studio? In 40 minutes, courtesy dissolves, and the door becomes the headline. The studio was built to look like a home. Low bookshelves, a Persian rug softened by years of careful vacuum lines, a bowl of green apples that no one would ever eat. Two armchairs faced each other at a civilized angle, a small marble table between them, and a wide window of softbox daylight, casting the room in an expensive calm. No audience, no laughter sign, no pressure valve, just microphones and manners. Anderson Cooper arrived first, as he always did, suit jacket unbuttoned, tie muted, expression both warm and antiseptic, an invitational neutrality that made people say more than they intended. He checked his notes twice, then set them aside. A red light blinked quietly on the camera, not yet awake. Off to the right, a producer whispered studio reminders about tone and pacing, the way one whispers about weather in a cemetery. Meghan Markle entered as if the door were a curtain and the hallway her stage. Her hair fell in glossy waves that caught the light, and the outfit was surgical in its decisions. A black silk blouse that moved like night water, a white blazer that declared leadership by simply existing. She said hello as a verdict. The room took it. She sat without being asked, crossing one leg over the other like a chess move she'd prepared 3 interviews ago. "Meghan," Anderson said, the soft smile that had calmed mayors and Marines alike. "Thank you for being here." "Am I?" she replied, glancing around the room as if confirming there was art on the walls. "I suppose I am," he let the first barb pass. "We designed this space to feel more like a conversation than a cross-examination." "How considerate," she said. "Will there be a fruit basket after I pass your little civics test?" A tiny hitch behind the glass. The producer lowered her eyes to the rundown. Anderson's smile didn't move. "Let's talk about the past year. A lot of people have opinions about you, some informed, some not. What's one misconception you'd like to correct right away?" Meghan tilted her head. "That I need their permission. Or yours." She paused, savoring the silence the way a musician savors a rest. "There's a cottage industry in decoding me. It's cute, profitable even, but inaccurate." "Inaccurate how? Do you really want a tutorial?" She lifted a shoulder. "Here's the free version. I don't fit into anyone's cheerful little framing device. Not the benevolent duchess, not the conniving villain. I am horrifyingly a person. And people," Anderson said gently, "still live in public narratives. You've spoken about that yourself." "I've spoken about many things," she said, the quotation marks audible. "Do you plan to footnote me before each question?" He accepted the sting like a tennis player accepting a good serve. No footnotes, just context. Interviews can be difficult, and speaking from experience, sometimes they end unexpectedly. He let the sentence perch there, a self-aware nod to a past segment that had combusted on air. "My hope is we stay in conversation." Meghan smiled without warmth. "Your hope, yes. And if I declined, will you add me to the list of difficult women who didn't play nice with the living room rug?" "You can decline anything," he said. "You're here voluntarily." She said, eyes sliding to the lens. "What a gorgeous word, voluntarily. It sounds like freedom and smells like a trap." Anderson folded his hands. "Then let me ask something simple. You've launched a new initiative centered on media literacy for young people. What inspired it?" "Being misread," she said quickly, repeatedly, aggressively. She leaned back. "When you become a Rorschach blot, you either dissolve or you start teaching viewers to recognize their ink." She looked at him as if he were the viewer in question. "You can keep that metaphor. It's free." "It's a strong one," Anderson said. "Would you grant that criticism and misreading are not always the same?" "I'd grant that criticism is the polite word people use when they've already decided who you are." She glanced toward the apples. "You set a bowl on the table, call it decor, and then count it as a meal." He considered a pivot. "You've described the press as both indispensable and intrusive. What does healthy scrutiny look like to you?" "Curiosity without entitlement," she said. "Questions that aren't performative. Interviews that aren't preludes to gotcha thumbnails on YouTube." "Do you feel this is performative?" "Don't you?" she asked, eyes bright. 2 chairs, 1 lamp, the theater of sincerity. Anderson breathed, a practiced even inhale that steadied the room. I'm trying to understand you on your terms, which presumes I want to be understood, she said, all silk and flint. Sometimes being misunderstood is safer. Then why accept the invitation? His tone was still velvet, but the thread underneath had tightened. If you prefer opacity, a camera isn't an ally. Because I don't mind the light, she said. I mind the angles. She tapped the armrest lightly. And in most rooms, the angles are fixed before I arrive. He nodded. That's fair. Let's unfix them. Tell me something you haven't yet said anywhere else. She laughed, a bright sound that never reached her eyes. And deliver you the pull quote you came for? Sweet. No. Behind the glass, someone swallowed audibly. Anderson let the laugh dissipate. I'm not here for souvenirs. I'm here because people who don't agree with you, or don't like you, still deserve the chance to hear you directly. It's what interviews are good for. People who don't like you will never hear you directly, she said. They'll hear the headline that corrals you into their confidence. You of all people know that. I do, he admitted. And I also know that substance survives headlines more often than cynics claim. Optimism is a business model, she said. Adorable, he recalled, without looking down. A question he hadn't wanted to ask this early. He asked it anyway. Some critics argue that your public advocacy sometimes centers you, that the very structures you oppose become tools in your personal narrative. Is that fair? Meghan stills. Not a freeze. More like the stillness of a cat deciding whether the hand reaching toward it is food or insult. You're asking if I'm a hypocrite. I'm asking how you square visibility with privacy. She took a beat. I square it by refusing to audition for mercy. She leaned forward then, elbows on knees, voice low and cutting. Let me offer you a shortcut, Anderson. When I speak, opportunist. When I don't, manipulator. When I smile, calculated. When I frown, ungrateful. When I sit in your tasteful chair and treat your questions like they aren't sacred artifacts, you get to say words like squaring and critics and visibility, as if you're not running the same maze as everyone else. The camera seemed to lean in without moving. Anderson held her gaze. I respect the double bind. I don't deny it exists, but a fair interview presses where the bind is tightest. And a polite guest, she said, is expected to say thank you for the pressure. I'm not asking for thanks, he said. No, she replied, just compliance dressed as candor. The apples sat like planets between them. Anderson's voice softened. Meghan, you've talked about compassion as a practice, not a slogan. What does compassion require of you in a conversation you don't enjoy? She smiled, slow, precise. Not throwing the chair. And beyond that, a steady exit route, she said. Fire codes are very educational. He accepted the joke without amusement. I'm trying to keep us in good faith. Good faith, she repeated. Another lovely perfume. Spritz it on a question and it smells like virtue. She folded her arms. Why don't you ask the one you've been petting since I walked in? He didn't blink. All right, some viewers wonder whether the exhaustion of public scrutiny is compatible with new media projects, podcasts, series, platforms that keep you present by design. Is there a contradiction? There's a boundary, she said. You're asking me to apologize for drawing it with a Sharpie instead of a pastel. That's not what I'm asking. Of course it is, she said, almost delighted now. You're trying very hard to be the man who gently extracts confessions. It's your art form. But you already referenced your eventful interview, didn't you? The one that exploded? You know what happens when people refuse to bleed on cue? The host tragically runs out of handkerchiefs. Anderson's composure, usually well to do his bones, shifted a millimeter. I referenced it to acknowledge my responsibility when interviews derail, or to signal to the audience that if this one derails, it's not your fault, she said sweetly. Clever. A producer's pen skated off the margin. Anderson sat back, unhurrying his words. We have the luxury of no audience tonight, no clapping, no gasps. Just you and me, and whatever clarity is possible between two strangers on a rug. I don't need a derailment. I don't want one. I'm asking sincerely for your help in avoiding it. Meghan watched him like a hawk watches a field. Then don't ask questions designed to prove I'm the problem. Are they designed for that? Every question is designed for something, she said. Yours are designed to look blameless. The red light on the camera deepened to its full glow. The room looked peaceful as a lifestyle catalog and felt like a matchbook. Anderson picked up his notes for the first time, not to read them, but to move them an inch left, as though that were the pivot required to start over. "Let's try again," he said, steady. "What's the last day you felt unobserved?" Meghan laughed softly. "You mean today before you asked me to inventory my piece for broadcast?" She tilted her face to the light. "But sure, let's pretend there's an answer. It was a morning with black coffee, a dog who doesn't know headlines, and a calendar that forgot my name. There, you can package that." "Thank you," he said. "I didn't ask to package it. I asked because it sounds human." "Human," she echoed, tasting the word, deciding it wasn't harmful. "Ask your next one, Anderson. Let's see if it bites." He did, not knowing yet that both of them were already bleeding, not from a question asked, but from the homey illusion of a room that could hold two incompatible definitions of respect without cracking. The apples watched, the rug kept its secrets, and the polite fight, invisible to anyone who needed applause to recognize combat, began in earnest. They resumed with the sound engineer's soft speed and a nod from the floor manager that felt like a truce no one had actually signed. The room performed serenity. The people inside it did not. Anderson's voice landed like a wool blanket on cold metal. "You've said boundaries are non-negotiable. For people watching who struggle to set their own, what does that look like in practice, beyond slogans?" Meghan smoothed an invisible crease on her white blazer, a gesture equal parts grace note and warning. "It looks like not answering questions that smuggle entitlement under the word curiosity. It looks like saying no without filling out a feelings report for the person who wanted a yes." "Some would call that courageous," Anderson said. "Others would call it evasive. And some," she countered, "call rain weather, and others call it ruined hair. Perspective is a noisy thing." "Fair," he said. "So, when your critics say you invite attention and then punish people for paying it, there it is," she cut in lightly, as if finding a mint at the bottom of a purse. "The postcard version of me. Come look at the painting, but if you look too long, you're the villain." "I'm not sending postcards," he said. "I'm asking how you experience the contradiction. I experience it as a double bind engineered for women who refuse to be grateful on schedule." She tilted her head. "If I narrate my life, I'm accused of monetizing privacy. If I don't, I'm accused of hiding power plays. Either way, the story ends with me owing someone an apology." "And do you owe anyone one?" he asked softly. She smiled the way a cat might smile if a cat could decide to. "Do you?" He didn't take the bait. "I've issued my share of corrections on air," he said. "I've apologized when I've been wrong." "How valiant," she murmured. "A knight of the Chiron." He let the jab pass, then lifted a card he hadn't intended to play so soon. "You launched a podcast framed as generosity, amplifying other people's voices." It paused abruptly. "Fans say they miss it." "What happened?" "We discovered that microphones can be both stethoscope and scalpel," she replied. "Some hearts didn't want the incision, even for healing. We adjusted." A beat. "Also, the business math bored me." "Will you penalize me for being bored?" "I won't penalize you for honesty," he said. "I'm curious about responsibility. When people sign up to be part of your projects and then feel nicked by the blade, what's your duty to them?" "My duty," she said, "is not to turn my own ribcage into public infrastructure. I create spaces. I am not a public utility." "Spaces with your name on the door," he added gently. "Which is a hanging sign, not a confession," she said. "I refuse to disappear in my own work just to reassure strangers I'm not vain." He nodded once, slowly. "Let's widen the frame. You've become a lightning rod. When you walk into a room, this room, everyone brings their weather. How do you not become the storm?" "By refusing to be their umbrella," she said. "Let people get rained on. It's cleansing." "That sounds unsparing." "Kindness isn't permanent shelter," she said. "Sometimes it's a towel and directions to a dryer." Something in Anderson's posture altered, still elegant, more braced. "I'm trying to meet you where you are. You keep moving the coordinates." "Because you keep assuming there's a fixed address," she said. "I'm not a postcode. I'm a perimeter." He glanced once toward the producer behind the glass. She didn't signal. He returned to the chessboard. "You've spoken about compassion fatigue. Are you experiencing interview fatigue right now?" I'm experiencing the tedium of being asked to translate myself into a dialect you can market as vulnerable, she said. Vulnerability is not a currency I owe your vault. I'm not asking for tears, he said. I know, she replied. You're asking for tidiness, for the arc that proves your home set produces revelation neatly between ad breaks. He folded his hands again. Meghan, see, she said, leaning back. That name and that tone, it's the velvet hammer, the one men use when women won't arrange their edges for camera. Anderson took a measured breath, and something like weariness edged the corners of his eyes. He chose steadiness anyway. You're very good at hearing subtext. Years of hearing it screamed as text, she said. He nodded. Then hear this. I'm not your enemy. I already have enemies, she said. You're just a man with a nice rug and a question that wants to be a mirror. Silence ticked. 1, 2, 3. Like a metronome, no one could shut off. May I try a different lane? He asked. Please, she said, fake bright. Signal before you merge. You've said your measure of success is impact, he began. Point to one moment in the last year that felt purely impactful. No backlash riding its coattails. She stared at him a 2 count too long, then answered. A school library with a quiet corner that didn't exist before. A girl sat in it. She exhaled. No cameras, no plaques. Just a chair and a girl and oxygen. That's a good answer, he said, sincerely. It wasn't an answer, she replied. It was a warning. Some things that matter will never survive your lower third. I can live with that, he said. I'll still ask. And I'll still decline, she said pleasantly. He smiled, thinly now. Stalemate then. Or choreography, she said. You lead, I pivot. The audience at home, oh, wait, we haven't invited one, applauds the illusion of forward motion. The producer coughed in the gallery, a helpless little bark of nerves. Anderson decided to risk the question she had warned him off. Let's talk accountability. Is there any part of the public friction around you that you believe you've contributed to? Not by existing, not by being a woman in public, but by how you've chosen to engage? Meghan's expression didn't move, but the air pressure changed. And here we arrive, she said softly, at the catechism. Recite the sins to be allowed the sacrament of credibility. It's not a catechism, he said. It's an opening. To what? Absolution courtesy of a cable network? To the possibility that agency includes self-critique. Anderson, she said, tone like glass. If I bleed now, will your rug come with stain remover? Don't, he said, more sharply than before, then softened. Please don't reduce me to a trope. I'm not here for spectacle. Everyone says that before the clip goes viral, she said. And then the comma appears, in a tense exchange, and the thumbnails start farm sprouting like mushrooms after rain. I can't control thumbnails, he said, calm reinstated by force of habit. I can control my questions and my tone. I can control whether I hear you even when you're swinging. I'm not swinging, she said, almost bored. I'm fencing. There's a difference. Your audience prefers swords to scalpels. We don't have an audience, he reminded lightly. We always have an audience, she countered, looking straight into the glass heart of the lens. Even if it's just the little red eye that blinks like a conscience. He set his notes aside again. His hands were empty now, palms neat on his knees. Okay, let's try something almost childlike. What does a good faith question sound like to you? One that isn't freighted with the expectation that I'll make your job easier, she said. Ask me something you're willing to accept an untelevisable answer to. He thought for a long beat, then, who are you when the microphone is off? Someone who doesn't need to answer that, she said, and smiled, this time with actual warmth at her own refusal. See, that felt marvelous. He laughed once, quiet, genuine, surprising even himself. It did, actually. Then carefully, I'm reaching for a bridge here. And I'm removing planks as you lay them, she said. Not out of malice, out of muscle memory. Does that muscle ever rest? It naps after I leave rooms like this, she said. I'll send you a postcard. He stared at the apples. I don't think postcards are coming. Then frame the rug, she said. Remember it as the last soft thing between us. The light above the camera blinked for time. 2 minutes to break. Anderson could feel the interview tilting toward a place that history calls the moment. He tried one more time to stitch it shut. If you could ask me anything, he said, what would it be? Meghan considered. Why you felt the need to mention your famously eventful interview earlier? Was it humility or preemptive insulation? He absorbed it. Both, he admitted. Humility because I've failed on air, insulation because I fear failing again. She nodded as if rewarding a student. There, that's the most honest thing you've said. Then meet me there, he said. One step? She met his gaze and declined with the softest shake of her head. I don't do pity waltzes. The floor manager lifted a hand. 30 seconds. The room seemed to shrink. Anderson straightened. When we come back, he said evenly, I'm going to ask about power. Who has it in a room like this? And what it costs to keep. Meghan flashed a small, amused smile. Wonderful. I'll invoice you for my answer. Why? Because power, she said, is the only thing in this room anyone intends to pay for. The light went red to black. The producer exhaled like a punctured balloon. Anderson's jaw set in a line that wasn't anger yet, but had stopped being patience. The lights came back up with a polite hum. The illusion of calm reassembled itself, but the air carried the static of something waiting to spark. Anderson Cooper straightened his jacket, smoothing the cuff with a movement so practiced it bordered on ritual. Meghan Markle leaned back, one ankle resting over her knee, perfectly poised, perfectly dismissive. Before the break, Anderson began, voice even as a metronome, we talked about boundaries and responsibility. I'd like to move towards something broader, power, who holds it, who loses it, and what it costs to keep. Meghan smiled faintly, almost indulgent. That's such a big, brave word, isn't it? Power. Journalists love it. Politicians fear it. And women are told they have too much of it the moment they stop apologizing for existing. I think that's a fair observation, Anderson replied carefully. But power also has texture. It isn't only taken or granted. Sometimes it's performed. Meghan's eyes sharpened. And sometimes that's the only way people listen. You perform humility. I perform control. We both know the choreography. Anderson allowed himself the smallest sigh. It's not performance I'm after. It's truth. She gave a small, dry laugh. Truth is performance, especially here. He held her gaze, steady and deliberate. Do you ever feel that cynicism protects you, but also isolates you? Do you ever feel neutrality is just cowardice with better lighting? She fired back, smooth as glass. Anderson blinked, not because he was offended, but because she'd said it with such precision, it nearly impressed him. No, he said finally. I feel neutrality is the last refuge of fairness. Then fairness must be terribly lonely, Meghan said. It never seems to show up when women are being devoured by opinion. I'm not here to devour you, he said softly. Of course not, she replied, voice silky and sharp. You're here to frame me. He let the words sit there. The silence was long enough to become another participant in the conversation. Then he said, You know, I thought about canceling this interview. Her brows rose slightly, intrigued. Oh? Why's that? Because the last time I sat across from someone who mistook dialogue for combat, he said, it stopped being journalism and became spectacle. I promised myself I wouldn't repeat it. And yet, here we are, Meghan said with a faint knowing smile. Maybe you secretly love the spectacle. Maybe you need it more than I do. Anderson's expression didn't change, but his eyes cooled. What I need, he said slowly, is for conversation to mean something again. And what I need, she countered, is for people to stop pretending their curiosity is noble. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. You think I'm pretending? I think you're polite, she said, which is much more dangerous. Anderson allowed himself a short laugh, low and humorless. You know, I've interviewed heads of state, soldiers, victims of war zones, and not one of them ever spoke to me like I was the problem. Well, she said sweetly, maybe that's because none of them were used to being questioned on their own narratives. There it was, the spark that found the dry grass. Anderson's eyes flashed, but his tone remained calm. Meghan, I'm not here to question your existence. I'm asking questions about choices. You've made powerful statements about truth and authenticity, but you've also curated your story with extraordinary control. That's not an insult. It's an observation. Her smile faded a degree. And what do you call it when men do the same? He didn't flinch. Branding. She laughed once, a sound without warmth. Exactly. And when women do it, it's manipulation. When we shape our stories, it's deceit. When we protect our image, it's arrogance. Thank you, Anderson, for proving my point so effortlessly. I wasn't trying to, he said quietly. That's the problem, she replied. You never think you are. The words hung there, heavy as smoke. The producer behind the glass mouthed something, perhaps rap soon, but neither of them looked away from each other. Anderson's voice dropped to something gentler, almost pleading. Do you ever wonder how it feels to sit across from someone who won't let you reach them? Meghan tilted her head. Do you ever wonder how it feels to be reached for only to be dissected? This isn't dissection, he said. Of course it is, she said. You just do it with silk gloves. Anderson's patience finally cracked, a fine fissure along the edge. You came here to be heard, he said. But hearing is a two-way act. I can't respect your truth if it refuses to stand still long enough to exist. Maybe my truth moves because your format cages it, she replied. And maybe, he said quietly, your armor doesn't let you see that someone here actually tried to understand you. Meghan smiled again, but this time it was sharp, tired, almost tragic. Understand me? Anderson, you can't even label me without trembling over the word controversial. You call it fairness. I call it fear. He leaned back, the professionalism now stretched thin over something undeniably human. You know, he said, I used to think the hardest interviews were with people who refused to talk, but it's harder with people who only talk to hear themselves win. The silence that followed was the kind that turns air into glass. Meghan's tone softened, not apologetic, but deliberate. And I used to think journalists asked questions to learn. Now I realize they ask to confirm what they already think. Anderson nodded slowly. Then maybe we're both wrong. Unlikely, she said, with a smile that could have frozen time. He glanced toward the camera, then back at her. We'll be right back after this, he said to no one in particular. The red light above the lens dimmed, and Meghan crossed her arms. Are we done pretending this is going well? Anderson looked down at his notes, folded them once, and placed them aside. We're not pretending, he said. We're surviving. Survival, she said. Finally, something I'm good at. Anderson smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then, let's see if you can survive one more question when we come back. Meghan uncrossed her legs, adjusted her blazer, and said with calm precision, only if it's worth answering. The producer gave a trembling countdown. The red light came back on. Anderson looked up, poised, but something inside him had shifted. The journalist was still there, but the man behind the calm was beginning to run out of patience. Final segment, he said, eyes on her. And maybe the most honest one. She tilted her chin, unbothered. Let's hope so. Honesty's so rare these days. What followed would be the interview's breaking point, the moment the civility shattered, and the quiet living room studio became the most uncomfortable room in television. The camera light blinked alive for what everyone hoped would be the last time. The stillness in the room was heavy now, like the quiet that falls between lightning and thunder. Anderson's tone had changed. The polite rhythm of the earlier segments was gone. He spoke slower, lower, his words stripped of the practiced gentleness that had defined his career. Meghan, he began, we've covered boundaries, truth, power, and I think people watching, or maybe listening, will still be wondering the same thing. What do you want from interviews like this? Her lips curved slightly, the faintest smirk. I could ask you the same thing. What do you want, Anderson? Redemption for your last disaster? A viral headline that makes you look dignified next to the woman who supposedly lost her temper? Anderson didn't flinch. What I want is conversation, not choreography. Meghan's tone turned airy. Then stop treating this like a trial, and I'll stop performing like a defense attorney. He leaned forward slightly. You don't have to perform at all. You say that, she said, tapping her finger against the armrest. But then the cameras roll, and you all start looking for the moment. That's what you want, isn't it? A crack, a sigh, something you can loop with dramatic music. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not breaking for your B-roll. The room stiffened. Behind the glass, a producer mouthed, cut soon. But Anderson didn't look away. He'd been calm through war reports, wildfires, and White House walkouts. But this was different. This was disrespect dressed as intellect. "Meghan," he said, voice firmer now, "I've sat here listening to you accuse, deflect, and mock. I've given you more room than any guest I've had this year, because I believe people deserve the benefit of being understood. But there comes a point where grace becomes indulgence." Her brows arched. "Oh, so now you're done indulging me?" "Yes," he said, quiet but absolute. "Because this isn't a conversation anymore. It's a monologue about how you're the only person in the room who's ever been misunderstood." Her smirk vanished. "You think you know what it's like to live under a microscope, to have people twist every word?" "I don't pretend to," he replied evenly, "but I know respect when I see it, and when I don't." Meghan let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh. "Respect? You mean compliance. You ask for honesty, but what you want is humility, preferably in heels." Anderson's jaw tightened. "No, I want decency. I want to be able to ask a question without being treated like an enemy. I want the viewers who actually care about what you have to say to see more than this." "This?" she repeated, gesturing toward herself. "What exactly is this, Anderson? Say it." He hesitated, but only for a moment. "Arrogance, wrapped in eloquence, dressed in white." The words landed like a slap. Meghan's face froze, her lips parting in disbelief. "Excuse me? You heard me?" he said. "You've spent this entire conversation talking about authenticity, empathy, compassion, but every answer has been a mirror angled back toward yourself. You insult, you deflect, and then you hide behind the language of empowerment. It's exhausting." Her voice dropped an octave. "You're out of line." "Maybe," Anderson admitted, "but I'd rather be out of line than out of truth." The air went razor thin. The crew had stopped moving. Even the hum of the lights seemed to hesitate. "Is this where you lecture me?" Meghan asked coldly. "Where the serious journalist reminds the little actress how to behave?" Anderson shook his head. "No, this is where the conversation ends." He sat back, calm now, resolute. "Because I'm not going to sit here and let you talk down to everyone in this room, including the people watching at home. This show is built on dialogue, not ego trips." "You think you can just end this?" she demanded. "I am ending it," he said. "Right now." She blinked, stunned by the simplicity of it. "You're kicking me off?" "I'm saying we're done," Anderson replied, his tone almost weary now. "You've made your point several times. But if respect can't exist in a conversation, then the conversation doesn't deserve airtime." For the first time, Meghan seemed caught off guard. Her posture faltered, just slightly, but her pride came roaring back. "You'll regret this? You know that, right?" Anderson stood up, calm and unshaken. "I've regretted worse things, but I've never regretted drawing a line." Meghan rose too, defiant but rattled. "Do you know how many people would kill for this interview?" "I know," he said, "and maybe next time, let one of them have the seat." She stared at him, incredulous, searching for a final word sharp enough to land. "Unbelievable," she muttered, tearing off her microphone. Anderson gestured to the crew. "We're clear," he said simply. The red light above the camera died. Meghan turned on her heel and walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing against the hardwood floor. She stopped halfway, looked back over her shoulder and said, "You know, Anderson, for someone who claims to care about truth, you're remarkably uncomfortable hearing it." He met her eyes evenly. "And for someone who claims to care about kindness, you sure forgot how to show it." Without another word, she left. The studio door closed behind her with a soft but final click. Anderson exhaled, long and quiet. Then he turned to the camera, now dark, and said to the crew, "Let's roll the segment on climate recovery. We're already late." One of the producers hesitated. "Do you want to address what just happened?" Anderson shook his head. "No, the footage speaks for itself." Within hours it would. Clips of the confrontation would flood social media. The moment Anderson Cooper lost patience with Meghan Markle. But the headlines would miss what really mattered, the calm before the storm, the respect tested past its limit, and a journalist choosing dignity over spectacle. That night, Anderson left the studio alone. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious. He looked up at the skyline, unshaken, and thought, Not every interview ends in revelation. Some end in a reminder that respect isn't negotiable, no matter how royal the guest or how bright the camera's light. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Tell us, who do you think handled it better, Anderson or Meghan? More dramatic moments from the world's most unforgettable interviews are coming soon. Stay tuned.